Good morning, folks. It's always a pleasure to be here with a lot of great old friends. General Sullivan, always great to see you, a mentor, I think, to all of us here in the room. General Ham, you and the whole AUSA organization, thanks for being great supporters for the Army in multiple ways, and one of them is providing these venues so we can have these professional discussions about where we're going and get the dialogue. And Gus Perner, you and the whole AMC team here, great hosts. For kind of pulling this all together. I'm really sort of the Gus Perner warm-up act here, who'll be following me after this. But I thought they graciously gave me a little bit of time here to set the bigger picture on multi-domain battle. This is an ongoing effort that the Army started, but really is becoming joy to nature. We had quite a bit of discussion on this at the fall AUSA conference. We had a great panel led by the Deputy Secretary of Defense and really members of or representative of the entire joint staff there. So what I'd like to do is kind of give an update on where we are, fill in some of the blanks, and try to describe how we are using it in the Army as part of the Joint Force, really to drive the future of where we are going. As I told people there, the United States Army is a concept-based, doctrine-driven Army. That's how we operate. We have doctrine that drives how we do what we do today. So I usually have my prop. I don't have it here, but it's what I call Boxo Doctrine. It's the box of our ADPs, and it says doctrine on it, U.S. Army Doctrine. And as I remind folks, you can take any Army doctrinal manual and you can execute what's in that manual today. With the organizations we have, with the material we have, the training and leader development, it is the way that we run our Army. So doctrine is how we run our Army today. Concepts are how we change the Army for the future. So doctrine is how you run the Army today, and concepts are how you change it for the future. So multi-domain battle right now is our concept for the future. We are working on a .mil-PF application to it. Working on our latest version of Field Manual 3.0 operations, which will have elements of this in it, and then working through the others. But again, I'd like to highlight a couple of reasons why we're even doing this, some of the insights we have in the current operating environment that we have today, what we think that portends for the future, and why we're headed down this road. So what I like to do, when in doubt, show a movie. So I'll do that, and it'll kind of contextualize a little bit of the operating environment. I can refer back to it during the rest of my brief here. So if we could please run the quick multi-domain battle film, the premiere right here today in Huntsville.
We're in the midst of a fundamental change in warfare. Ongoing shifts in geopolitical, social, demographic, economic, and technological developments impact near and far-term possibilities for conflict. This creates a demand for agile and innovative solutions to meet current and future threats. Multi-domain battle is the key to winning in this complex world. War has always been fought across multiple domains. Combining efforts across these domains is ideal for commanders. From ancient Greece to today, the role of land and sea in warfare is paramount, with the importance of air becoming clear in World War I and equally paramount today. The architects of D-Day drew upon this idea to achieve victory across air, land, and sea domains. They demonstrated an ability to apply complex use of timing and placement to create multiple problems for the enemy and secure critical opportunities for the Allies. War is the ultimate agent of change, but in times of relative peace, the Army achieves change by being a concept-based, doctrine-driven organization. It utilizes concepts to change how it operates. Today, our potential adversaries know the joint force performs by drawing interdependence across air, land, sea, space, cyber, and electromagnetic spectrum. They also realize that interdependence is our primary vulnerability. Without focused change, the U.S. military will not be trained, organized, equipped, or postured to deter or defeat highly capable peer enemies to win in future war. The U.S. Army and U.S. Marine Corps have taken together the first step of creating this focus change by defining the problem set in the white paper, Multi-Domain Battle, Combined Arms for the 21st Century. This white paper has the potential to provide a framework to design the ground component concept of the future joint force that will fight and win our nation's wars. Multi-domain battle will give the Joint Force Commander a level of cross-domain integration never before achieved, from the tactical level to the operational and strategic levels. It will integrate capabilities across multiple domains to create windows of superiority, because in the changing battlefield of today into the future, no one domain can dominate. Joint force operations across multiple domains, in partnership with other nations and organizations, present the enemy with multiple dilemmas and provide multiple options for the Joint Force Commander. To achieve this, a concept must be thoroughly tested, experimented, and analyzed. Over the next year, multi-domain battle will be developed by an inclusive, integrated concept development team through an intense process designed to question, break, and subsequently strengthen the resulting concept. The key to winning in a complex world will be full integration of complex systems and capabilities simultaneously across multiple domains. We are not alone in this race. Some of our potential adversaries have already begun to deploy elements of multi-domain battle. When the call comes, the price of freedom may very well stand on the strength of what will come out of multi-domain battle. The innovation, ingenuity, and agility of America will inherently be the cornerstone to developing this concept to win. Bring your innovation and ingenuity. Be part of the solution. Join the discourse. Go to #multi-domain-battle.
So we're utilizing now in this era of digital and cyber domain. You go to #multi-domain-battle. It's trending now, and you can give us your thoughts. But that actually is one of the things that we're using this to drive change, and compared to even to solutions previously that a lot of us grew up with in the Army. If you put up the first slide, please. So when we have taken a look at our operating environment that we have now and where it's going in the future, we've taken a look at near peer, current adversaries, potential adversaries. What we have found is that there's really three things they are focusing on when they're looking at dealing with the United States, and that is, one, that they try to fracture us and the successes we had utilizing airland battle. So from Desert Storm on, they've been focusing, they saw what we did, they said, you know what, the U.S. military and its coalition is very good when they bring it together, so we want to sort of fracture that synchronization. We want to re-domain them. Don't let them bring that together that they saw starting with Desert Storm, and really, if you've been on the receiving end of it, as an adversary from us since then. The other thing that they have learned from us is you need to keep the United States military and its coalition out of the area of operations. Anti-access area denial, A2AD. Keep them at arm's length. Don't let them get a footprint into the area of operations, because once they get a footprint in there, they'll build up the proverbial mountain of iron with Gus and all these great multifunctional logisticians we have, and you'll never get the Americans out. Even if they want to lead themselves, they won't be able to get out. So keep them out. And then the third thing is fix them. Do not let the Americans and their allies maneuver on you, because once the U.S. military and its allies maneuver, they become very good at a critical point in time getting numerical and positional advantage. They might not have total numerical advantage. In fact, generally they're at a disadvantage numerically, but what we've been very good at via our systems and our ability to maneuver is that we can get to area positional advantage and temporary positions of numerical advantage to turn the tide in our favor. And so our adversaries have said, if I can fix the U.S. military and its coalition partners, and I can keep them sort of without being able to bring their domains together, and if I can even keep them at arm's length, I have a chance of defeating them and deterring them. Therefore, what we are working on is, how do we deal with the anti-access error denial problem? And how do we provide what we say up here is freedom of maneuver? Because that is to our advantage. Now, we are a maneuver-based force. It is one of our warfighting functions. Some of our adversaries out there tend to be much more of a fires-based force than a maneuver-based force. One of the reasons is it takes a lot of training to be able to maneuver. It takes a lot of leader development. It takes a lot of empowerment of subordinates to maneuver. If you don't want to empower your subordinates, if you don't want to spend that much time in training and leader development, you tend to be a more static force, yet maybe more fire-centric. So we think our ace in the hole is our ability to empower, the ability to train and develop young leaders, and to maneuver all elements of combat power around the battlefield, which are the 6 warfighting functions, as well as information and leadership. So in the U.S. Army, we define maneuver. One of the elements of maneuver is being able to maneuver leadership, physical leadership, to a position of advantage on the battlefield. So to do this in the environment that I talked about, what we are saying is that we are going to have, we call it windows of domain superiority, when I can bring together all of the capabilities of all of the domains and maneuver those windows of domain superiority around the battlefield. Now, one of the ways this is different than even when we started up looking at air-land battle, and the way that we solve a lot of problems even now in the Army, if you go to the next slide, is we would have a problem. We would then break it down into warfighting functions and generally break it down into domains, and then start solving those problems in those proverbial cylinders of excellence, or those warfighting functions, or those domains. They would then be optimized in that warfighting function and or domain. And after we would optimize the solution, we would then, after we develop the solution, federate it, synchronize it and federate it. The challenge is, what we have many times were solutions that were not necessarily optimized to work together with other solutions. What they were optimized for was to solve a particular part of the problem, not be brought together to smoothly integrate with all of the other solutions to it. And then what we end up having to do is come up with workarounds, with a little black box that'll take this solution and translate it with this solution, et cetera, like that. So we were synchronizing a federated series of solutions, which makes it very difficult for the commander. Too many times our solutions were optimized for a person who owned one part of the fight, but were not optimized for the commander that owned all of it. So one of the differences here with multi-domain battle is we're saying that instead of synchronizing a series of federated solutions further down the sort of process stream of executing the mission, from the very beginning, what we want to do is define the problem initially as a multifunctional, multi-domain problem from the very beginning. To say, no, this is not just a fires problem. This is not just an intel problem. This is not just a land problem. This is a problem from the very beginning that has multiple domains associated with it and multiple functions. And therefore, we're going to define it that way, and therefore the solution from the very beginning should include all aspects of that, versus each person taking their little chunk, they go off, spend years on it, then we come back, and then we've got to synchronize a federated set of solutions. A great example of that are a counter unmanned aerial system strategy. When we started first dealing with enemy unmanned aerial systems, the gut instinct was, well, that's an air defense problem. That's an air defense problem because they're in the air. And in fact, we have a very close ally of ours that was dealing with a adversary that was using the small quadcopter UASs, and they shut it down with a Patriot missile. Now, that worked. They got it, okay? And we love Patriot missiles, and I know there's folks out there that build them and sell them, and they're great. They're a high-demand, low-density item. The problem is that on the kinetic exchange ratio, the Patriot won, okay? That quadcopter that cost $200 from Amazon.com did not stand a chance against the Patriot. So on the kinetic exchange ratio, they won. On the economic exchange ratio, I'm not sure that's a good economic exchange ratio. In fact, if I'm the enemy, I'm thinking, hey, I'm just going to get on eBay and buy as many of these $300 quadcopters as I can and expend all the Patriot missiles out there. So what we've done is look at it and say, no, this is a commander's problem. This is not an air defense problem. This is a commander's problem. We defined it from the very beginning. And now we're looking at, hey, there's ways to get after this with electronic warfare, with cyber. There's all kinds of different ways that we can get to this, a SEMA approach. There well may be part of that, a kinetic approach from air defenders or other things like that, but define it very differently from the beginning versus just hand off to Fort Sill and say, have at it, get after this piece. And therefore, and then we start taking a look at the other services. So how are you dealing with this? Okay, how are you dealing with it in your domain? Because everyone is being impacted by this. So we really kind of rolled out the concept of this. It was really about PowerPoint Deep last October at the fall AUSA. We now have the white paper out, which I think is being distributed here. We are working on FM 3.0. But because I said one of the focuses of this is we define it from the very beginning as multifunctional, multi-domain, it's also joint. So you saw the white paper we're handing out here is signed by General Neller, Commandant of the U.S. Marine Corps, and General Milley, Chief of Staff of the United States Army. So they are both signing on to that white paper before we even work the doctrinal aspect of it. Sort of my counterpart in the German Army, Lieutenant General Leidenberger, is he here today? I think he's coming here tomorrow. Came down and spent a couple days at TRADOC last week, but en route to TRADOC last week, he stopped at McCitic at Quantico, Semper Fi, hoorah, and spent a day with them because it's between D.C. and Fort Eustis. And so when he arrived for dinner, I said, so, sir, how'd your visit go? He goes, good. I was with Miss Citic talking to the Marines. He says, what did we talk about? He says, well, we talked about multi-domain battle. So that's what the Marine Corps was talking about in McCitic. So we're seeing this as the Army has sort of been working this, and we've been pushing it, but we're making it by nature a joint construct. I was down at Maxwell Air Force Base at the Air War College, and as a guest speaker, and one of the groups I talked to was their elective on the role of air power in multi-domain battle. So we are approaching this from the very beginning as not only multi-domain, but inherently joint. And what we have to do now, and I know these become very sort of complicated slides here, but when we take a look at a problem set, we are saying, let's take a look at all of the domains there, and how do we get a solution and multiple options? You saw in the film it said multiple dilemmas. Multiple dilemmas to the Army provide multiple options to the commander, that as we have problem sets, we can move between the domains, and we may have more than one dilemma to give the enemy so that it is very difficult for them to be able to mitigate that. Hence, it raises their risk calculus all that higher. One of the big challenges for us as we start, because, as I said, concepts change in the Army, and as General Sullivan always reminds us, the intellectual leads the physical. So, sir, I coach you all the time on that. So what we're using this for is to intellectually change how we think about solving problems, so that we physically change how we solve problems. And Bo's going to have, I think, a panel on this later, talking through this. I don't know if you're going to mention warfighting challenges or et cetera. But we're saying we're not looking at a solution in a warfighting function by domain. We are looking at accomplishing a mission. Here is a problem that a commander has. How do all the domains come together? What is a .meal-PF solution, et cetera, like that? The challenge we have, and these are great venues to talk about, our requirements process, which TRADOC does for the Army, and what we output is not necessarily set up for that. I mean, so we're working with ASALT, and a lot of folks will say, you know what, we've got to rethink the intellectual leads of physical. We've got to rethink how we define requirements. We have to rethink, as an end item user, the warfighter, what are the different kind of tools that we want out there. And then we have to take a look at if we redefine requirements, how do we acquire them differently? When you start pulling the onion back on this, it really drives a lot of change, a lot more change than just intellectual change about how you're going to fight, but also how are you going to build the Army, how do you train the Army, how do you develop leaders, et cetera, like that. So I know we want to stay on time, and I know there's some Q&A. Is that the plan here? Yeah, okay. So let me pause here, because we have a couple of days of this, and Bo's got a panel and things like that, but I'd be willing to, in fact, would welcome just some questions now that I can sort of provide some clarity on.
Well, would you like to read the questions? Do you want me to read them?
Why don't you read them, yeah.
I noticed you don't have your glasses.
Right.
Okay. We've done this, actually.
I don't need glasses. My arms are just too short. That's the problem. Yeah.
Well, no, I need my glasses. Yeah, would you hold the card?
Yeah, we need cue cards.
Airburst munitions exist today for systems from 300 millimeters to 120 millimeters. Why does the Army not create a requirement for 155 millimeter airburst munition? This could convert an artillery system from only a ground-to-ground capability into a multi-domain battle capability.
So, in fact, if you could, you know, when you have venues like this, there are different kinds of questions you can get. You can get stupid questions. People say there's no such thing as a stupid question. I get dumb questions all the time. I try not to embarrass people, but I get them. Then you can have good questions. Good questions are ones that maybe have a little bit of controversy to them, their substance, they can go in many different directions, et cetera, like that. And then the third kind is you can have excellent questions. An excellent question is a question that I already have a backup slide made for. So that is an excellent question. So if you could put up the multi-domain fire slide, cross-domain fires. An excellent question. I'm not going to say, get into what, yeah, I need a 155 that does this, that does this, but to the point of the question, what we are looking at is the ability to develop cross-domain fires. That we don't just have a land-based, I'll use artillery example, an artillery shell that starts off and goes and engages another land-based target. I mean, we'll have those, and that's what we have now. But there's nothing to say you can't have a land-based Army fires capability that could have an anti-ship capability or an anti-US UAV capability, which was just announced. And so what we are doing is, and I will tell you, a number of the combatant commanders, specifically the PACOM commander and EUCOM commander, based on the threats they have now, are very interested in this capability. That if you had an Army fires unit, that it could actually provide effects in all of the domains. You could use it for counter UAS, you could use it for counter maritime activity, obviously land, air defense, various things like that. And as the question alluded to, when you think about it, sometimes it's not that dramatic a change in the capability that is inherent already in a lot of our weapon systems. As I say, if you're engaging, you know, we have systems that engage land to land. If you're going to engage land to maritime, to land to sea, most of the physics are pretty much the same. You know, the relative humidity of the point of impact doesn't generally affect the flight that much. And so I think the question alluded to that when you start thinking about this, it's not as dramatic a change as one would think as we're looking out there. And I won't address that requirement. I can tell you we're looking very broadly at that. So an excellent question, mainly because I had a slide.
With cross-domain maneuver, how do you synchronize at echelon across the joint force?
Yeah.
And do you have sufficient mission command depth to achieve what you are trying to do?
You know, this is probably the thing that we are focusing on the most right now and gives us the largest challenge. Because it gets to the network, but it gets to many other things than that. And so I spend a lot of time reading doctrine that my predecessors put out, and I thought it was good now, and now I look at it and it's outstanding, because now I sort of can feel their pain, how hard it is to do that, to take it all into account. And so I have a copy of 100-5 literally on my desk that I look at all the time, and I've told my guys that really is a great paradigm, because it drove so much change in the Army, a lot of what we have today. And if you open up 100-5, you kind of have the introduction chapter, and then chapter 2, which is really the substantive part that gets into it. What chapter 2 talks about, and which really, I think, set us on the path to the Army that we have now, it talks about the battlefield framework. It laid out the battlefield framework as we came to know of close, deep, and rear. And then once you had a battlefield framework and it defined what that framework was, then it could assign responsibilities to echelons of command in our Army. And then it helped drive requirements. If this is what a corps has to do, this is what corps artillery has to have, et cetera, like that. And it all flowed very well. So I never realized that till I sort of had to do it myself, why the first big chapter in 100-5 was battlefield framework. Because if you don't have, as General Sullivan reminds us, if you don't have an intellectual understanding of what this looks like, it's hard to how you put all the pieces together. And so Mike Lundy and crew and in the Maneuver Center and others, I know we got the Armored Commandant and a couple other folks here, that is what we are focusing on right now. What does the battlefield framework of multi-domain battle look like? And, you know, there might be a close, deep, and rear, but it's defined very differently. Because in 100-5, it defined deep as engaging uncommitted enemy forces. Uncommitted enemy forces in order to shape the battle for further close battle. Well, what we're finding today is that there are very few uncommitted forces, that you can have a force thousands of miles away in cyber, and it's committed to the close fight. So so then you say, well, so who, you know, quote unquote, owns that fight? How do you do it? And so we're really working through the battlefield framework, and the two big challenges that come up with it as we are looking at how war is being fought today, and more so in the future, is you don't tend to be as separated by geography as we used to be. It tends to be more by time and the specific effect. But all of those effects may occur in the same place, whereas in close, deep, and rear, those are separate places. They may occur in the same place, but maybe at different times. So now to the point of the question, so how do you synchronize that when it's all occurring right at the squad level? In other words, there could be cyber activity going on at the squad. So who's dealing with that? At what level? Where are the authorities? And so the question really is not what does the Corps do, what does the division do? That comes later on. The question is, what is the battlefield framework? And then what are the authorities, the responsibilities that come from that with multi-domain battle? And we don't have the answer yet. We have ideas, and I'm willing to talk to folks or have any other ideas out there. That's what makes venues like this so good.
Well, thank you very much, sir. Let's have a hand for General Perkins.
Thanks, folks.